Chapter 11. The Clever Class. It was school that kept me going in those dark days. When I was in the street it felt as though every man I passed might be a Talib. We hid our school bags and our books in our shawls. My father always said that the most beautiful thing in a village in the morning is the sight of a child in a school uniform, but now we were afraid to wear them. We had moved up to high school. Madam Miriam said no one wanted to teach our class as we asked so many questions. We liked to be known as the clever girls. When we decorated our hands with henna for holidays and weddings, we drew calculus and chemical formulae instead of flowers and butterflies. My rivalry with Malka Noor continued, but after the shock of being beaten by her when she first joined our school, I worked hard and had managed to regain my position on the school honors board for first in class. She usually came second and Maniba third. The teachers told us examiners first looked at how much we had written, then presentation. Maniba had the most beautiful writing and presentation of the three of us, but I always told her she did not trust herself enough. She worked hard as she worried that if she got low marks her male relatives might use it as an excuse to stop her education. I was weakest in math, once I got 0 in a test, but I worked hard at it. My chemistry teacher Sir Obaidullah, we called all our teachers Sir or Miss, said I was a born politician because, at the start of oral exams, I would always say, "Sir, can I just say you are the best teacher and yours is my favorite class?" Some parents complained that I was being favored because my father owned the school, but people were always surprised that despite our rivalry we were all good friends and not jealous of each other. We also competed in what we call board exams. These would select the best students from private schools in the district, and one year Malka Noor and I got exactly the same marks. We did another paper at school to see who would get the prize and again we got equal marks. So people wouldn't think I was getting special treatment, my father arranged for us to do papers at another school, that of his friend Ahmad Shah. Again we got the same, so we both got the prize. There was more to school than work. We liked performing plays. I wrote a sketch based on Romeo and Juliet about corruption. I played Romeo as a civil servant interviewing people for a job. The first candidate is a beautiful girl, and he asks her very easy questions such as, "How many wheels does a bicycle have?" When she replies, 2, he says, "You are so brilliant." The next candidate is a man, so Romeo asks him impossible things like, "Without leaving your chair tell me the make of the fan in the room above us." "How could I possibly know?" Ask the candidate, "You are telling me you have a PhD and you don't know." Replies Romeo. He decides to give the job to the girl. The girl was played by Maniba, of course, and another classmate Atiya played the part of my assistant to add some salt, pepper and masala with her witty asides. Everyone laughed a lot. I like to mimic people, and in breaks my friends used to beg me to impersonate our teachers, particularly Sir Obaidullah. With all the bad stuff going on in those days, we needed small reasons to laugh. The army action at the end of 2007 had not got rid of the Taliban. The army had stayed in Swat and were everywhere in the town, yet Fazlullah still broadcast every day on the radio, and throughout 2008 the situation was even worse than before with bomb blasts and killings. All we talked about in those days was the army and the Taliban and the feeling that we were caught between the two. Atiya used to tease me by saying, "Taliban is good, army not good." I replied, "If there is a snake and a lion coming to attack us, what would we say is good, the snake or lion?" Our school was a haven from the horrors outside. All the other girls in my class wanted to be doctors, but I decided I wanted to be an inventor and make an anti-Taliban machine which would sniff them out and destroy their guns. But of course at school we were under threat too, and some of my friends dropped out. Fazlullah kept broadcasting that girls should stay at home, and his men had started blowing up schools, usually during nighttime curfew when the children were not there. The first school to be blown up was Shawar Zange, a government girls' primary school in Mada. We couldn't believe anyone would do such a thing. Then many more bombings followed, almost every day. Even in Mingora, there were explosions. Twice bombs went off when I was in the kitchen, so close by that the whole house rattled and the fan above the window fell down. I became very scared of going into the kitchen and would only run in and out. On the last day of February 2008, I was in the kitchen when we heard an enormous blast. It was ear-shatteringly loud and obviously close by. As we always did, we called to each other to make sure we were all safe. Kaista, Pishu, Bobby, Kashal, Atal. Then we heard sirens, one after another, as if all the ambulances of Mingora were passing. A suicide bomber had struck in the basketball court at Haji Baba High School. Funeral prayers had been underway for a popular local police officer, Javeed Iqbal, who had been killed by a suicide bomber in a remote area while trying to escape from the Taliban. He was from Mingora, and his body had been brought back for the funeral and a police salute. Now the Taliban had bombed the mourners. More than 55 people were killed, including Javeed Iqbal's young son and many people we knew. 10 members of Maniba's family were there and were either killed or injured. Maniba was devastated and the whole town was in shock. There were condolences in every mosque. "Are you scared now?" I asked my father. "At night our fear is strong, Johnny," he told me, "but in the morning, in the light, we find our courage again." And this is true for my family. We were scared, but our fear was not as strong as our courage. "We must rid our valley of the Taliban, and then no one has to feel this fear," he said. In times of crisis we Pashtuns resort to the old trusted ways, so in 2008 elders in Swat created an assembly called the Qawmi Jirga to challenge Fazlullah. 3 local men, Mukhtar Khan Yusufzai, Khurshid Kakaji and Zahid Khan went from Hujra to Hujra persuading elders to join together. The senior elder was a white-bearded man of 74 called Abdul Khan Khalik, who had been one of the Queen's bodyguards when she had visited Swat to stay with our wali. Even though my father was not an elder or a Khan, he was chosen as spokesperson as he was not afraid to speak out. Though he was more poetic in Pashto, he could speak our national language, Urdu, and English fluently, which meant he was an effective communicator outside Swat as well as inside. Every day, on behalf of the Swat Council of Elders, he was at seminars or on the media challenging Fazlullah. "What are you doing?" he would ask. "You are playing havoc with our lives and our culture." My father would say to me, "Any organization which works for peace, I will join. If you want to resolve a dispute or come out from conflict, the very first thing is to speak the truth. If you have a headache and tell the doctor you have a stomach ache, how can the doctor help? You must speak the truth. The truth will abolish fear." When he met his fellow activists, particularly his old friends Ahmad Shah, Muhammad Farooq, and Zahid Khan, I often went with him. Ahmad Shah also had a school, where Muhammad Farooq worked, and they would sometimes gather on his lawn. Zahid Khan was a hotel owner and had a big hujra. When they came to our house I would bring them tea, then sit quietly listening as they discussed what to do. "Malala is not just the daughter of Ziauddin," they would say, "she is the daughter of all of us." They went back and forth to Peshawar and Islamabad and gave lots of interviews on the radio, particularly to the Voice of America and the BBC, taking turns so there would always be one of them available. They told people that what was happening in Swat was not about Islam. My father said the Taliban presence in Swat was not possible without the support of some in the army and the bureaucracy. The state is meant to protect the rights of its citizens, but it's a very difficult situation when you can't tell the difference between state and non-state and can't trust the state to protect you against non-state. Our military and IC are very powerful and most people did not like to voice these things publicly, but my father and many of his friends were not scared. "What you are doing is against our people and against Pakistan," he would say. "Don't support Talibanization, it's inhuman. We are told that Swat is being sacrificed for the sake of Pakistan, but no one and nothing should be sacrificed for the state. A state is like a mother, and a mother never deserts or cheats her children." He hated the fact that most people would not speak up. In his pocket he kept a poem written by Martin Niemöller, who had lived in Nazi Germany. "First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the Catholics, and I didn't speak out because I was not a Catholic. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I knew he was right. If people were silent, nothing would change. At school, my father organized a peace march and encouraged us to speak out against what was happening. Maniba put it well. We Pashtuns are a religion-loving people, she said. Because of the Taliban, the whole world is claiming we are terrorists. This is not the case. We are peace-loving. Our mountains, our trees, our flowers, everything in our valley is about peace. A group of us girls gave an interview on ATV Khyber, the only privately owned Pashto television channel, about girls dropping out of school due to militancy. Teachers helped us beforehand on how to respond to questions. I wasn't the only one to be interviewed. When we were 11 and 12, we did them together, but as we turned 13 or 14, my friends' brothers and fathers didn't allow them because they had entered puberty and should observe purdah, and also they were afraid. One day I went on Geo, which is one of the biggest news channels in our country. There was a wall of screens in their office. I was astonished to see so many channels. Afterwards I thought, the media needs interviews. They want to interview a small girl, but the girls are scared, and even if they're not, their parents won't allow it. I have a father who isn't scared, who stands by me. He said, "You are a child and it's your right to speak." The more interviews I gave, the stronger I felt and the more support we received. I was only 11, but I looked older, and the media seemed to like hearing from a young girl. One journalist called me Takra Janai, a bright shining young lady, and another said, "You are Paka Janai, you are wise beyond your years." In my heart was the belief that God would protect me. If I am speaking for my rights, for the rights of girls, I am not doing anything wrong. It's my duty to do so. God wants to see how we behave in such situations. There is a saying in the Quran, the falsehood has to go and the truth will prevail. If one man, Fazlullah, can destroy everything, why can't one girl change it? I wondered. I prayed to God every night to give me strength. The media and SWAT were under pressure to give positive coverage to the Taliban. Some even respectfully called the Taliban spokesman Muslim Khan School Dada, when in reality he was destroying schools. But many local journalists were unhappy about what was happening to their valley, and they gave us a powerful platform as we would say things they didn't dare to. We didn't have a car, so we went by rickshaw, or one of my father's friends would take us to the interviews. One day my father and I went to Peshawar to appear on a BBC Urdu talk show hosted by a famous columnist called Wasitullah Khan. We went with my father's friend Am Malala and his daughter. 2 fathers and 2 daughters. To represent the Taliban they had Muslim Khan, who wasn't in the studio. I was a bit nervous, but I knew it was important as many people all over Pakistan would be listening. How dare the Taliban take away my basic right to education? I said. There was no response from Muslim Khan because his phone interview had been pre-recorded. How can a recording respond to live questions? Afterwards people congratulated me. My father laughed and said I should go into politics. Even as a toddler you talked like a politician, he teased. But I never listened to my interviews. I knew these were very small steps. Our words were like the eucalyptus blossoms of spring tossed away on the wind. The destruction of schools continued. On the night of October 7, 2008 we heard a series of faraway blasts. The next morning we learned that masked militants had entered the Sangoda Convent School for Girls and the Excelsior College for Boys and blown them up using improvised explosive devices, IEDs. The teachers had already been evacuated as they had received threats earlier. These were famous schools, particularly Sangoda, which dated from the time of the last Wali and was well known for academic excellence. They were also big. Excelsior had over 2,000 pupils and Sangoda had 1,000. My father went there after the bombings and found the buildings completely razed to the ground. He gave interviews to TV reporters amid broken bricks and burned books and returned home horrified. "It's all just rubble," he said. Yet my father remained hopeful and believed there would be a day when there was an end to the destruction. What really depressed him was the looting of the destroyed schools, the furniture, the books, the computers were all stolen by local people. He cried when he heard this, "They are vultures jumping on a dead body." The next day he went on a live show on the Voice of America and angrily condemned the attacks. Muslim Khan, the Taliban spokesman, was on the phone. "What was so wrong with these two schools that you should bomb them?" my father asked him. Muslim Khan said that Sangoda was a convent school teaching Christianity and that Excelsior was coeducational, teaching girls and boys together. "Both things are false," replied my father. Sangoda School has been there since the 1960s and never converted anyone to Christianity, in fact some of them converted to Islam. And Excelsior is only coeducational in the primary section. Muslim Khan didn't answer. "What about their own daughters?" I asked my father. "Don't they want them to learn?" Our headmistress Madam Mariam had studied at Sangoda, and her younger sister Aisha was a pupil there, so she and some of the other Sangoda girls transferred to our school. The monthly school fees were never enough to cover all our outgoings, so the extra fees were welcome, but my father was unhappy. He went everywhere he could demand the reconstruction of both schools. Once he spoke at a big gathering and held up an audience member's baby girl and said, "This girl is our future. Do we want her to be ignorant?" The crowd agreed that they would sacrifice themselves before giving up their daughter's education. The new girls had horrible stories. Aisha told us how one day on the way home from Sangoda she had seen a Taliban holding up the severed head of a policeman by its hair, blood dripping from the neck. The Sangoda girls were also very bright, which meant more competition. One of them, Rita, was excellent at making speeches. She became a good friend of mine and of Maniba's, which sometimes caused fights as 3 is a tricky number. Maniba often brought food to school and would just bring one spare fork. "Are you my friend or Rita's?" I asked Maniba. She laughed and said, "We are all 3 good friends." By the end of 2008, around 400 schools had been destroyed by the Taliban. We had a new government under President Asif Zardari, the widower of Benazir, but they didn't seem to care about SWAT. I told people things would be different if Zardari's own daughters were at school in SWAT. There were suicide bombings all over the country, even the Marriott Hotel in Islamabad had been blown up. In SWAT it was safer in the town than in the remote areas, and many of our family came from the countryside to stay with us. The house was small and got very crowded with the cousins who already lived with us. There was little to do. We couldn't play cricket in the street or on the roof like we used to. We played marbles in the yard over and over again. I fought non-stop with my brother Kushal, and he would go crying to our mother. Never in history have Kushal and Malala been friends. I liked doing my hair in different styles and would spend ages in the bathroom in front of the mirror trying out looks I had seen in movies. Until I was 8 or 9 my mother used to cut my hair short like my brother's because of lice and also to make it easier to wash and brush as it would get messed up under my shawl. But finally I had persuaded her to let me grow it to my shoulders. Unlike Maniba, who has straight hair, mine is wavy, and I like to twist it into curls or tie it into plaits. "What are you doing in there, Pishu?" my mother would shout. "Our guests need the bathroom and everyone is having to wait for you." One of the worst times was the fasting month of Ramadan in 2008. During Ramadan no food or drink can pass a Muslim's lips in daylight hours. The Taliban bombed the power station, so we had no electricity, then a few days later they blasted the pipeline, so we had no gas either. The price of the gas cylinders we used to buy from the market doubled, so my mother had to cook on a fire like we did in the village. She didn't complain, food needed to be cooked, and she cooked it, and there were others worse off than us. But there was no clean water and people started dying from cholera. The hospital could not cope with all the patients and had to erect big tents outside to treat people. Though we had no generator at home, my father bought one to install at the school, and fresh water was pumped from a borehole, which all the children in the neighborhood went to collect. Every day there would be lines of people waiting to fill jugs, bottles and drums. One of the neighbors got frightened. "What are you doing?" he asked. "If the Taliban find out you're giving water in the month of Ramadan they will bomb us." My father replied that people would die either of thirst or bombings. The days when we used to go for trips or for picnics seemed like a dream. No one would venture from their homes after sunset. The terrorists even blew up the ski lift and the big hotel in Malala where tourists used to stay. A holiday paradise turned into a hell where no tourist would venture. Then, at the end of 2008, Fazlullah's deputy Maulana Shah Dorn announced on the radio that all girls' schools would close. From 15 January girls must not go to school, he warned. First I thought it was a joke. How can they stop us from going to school? I asked my friends. They don't have the power. They are saying they will destroy the mountain, but they can't even control the road. The other girls didn't agree with me. Who will stop them? They asked. They have already blown up hundreds of schools and no one has done anything. My father used to say the people of SWAT and the teachers would continue to educate our children until the last room, the last teacher and the last student was alive. My parents never once suggested I should withdraw from school, ever. Though we loved school, we hadn't realized how important education was until the Taliban tried to stop us. Going to school, reading and doing our homework wasn't just a way of passing time, it was our future. That winter it snowed, and we built snow bears but without much joy. In winter the Taliban used to disappear into the mountains, but we knew they would be back and had no idea what was coming next. We believed school would start again. The Taliban could take our pens and books, but they couldn't stop our minds from thinking.